Hello, everyone.
Hi, all.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey, everyone.
To get started, did I get like anybody's names or backgrounds like mixed up, or like try to make you like seem like more human because you all are like badasses? Like, did I miss anything?
You did really
It's
well.
always good to feel human. It's always good.
Just feel human, Albert.
Well, I have to say, since I joined Kadena, I feel much more human than I was before. So, I'm a mortal person amongst the greatness of Kadena.
I dig it. And I mean, that is a great way of saying this. And y'all, as a heads up, I'm going to put the question up. But when we put the question up, your names go away. So I will bring it back down, but I can always bring it back up if I need to, just so that way people can associate your names with your faces. So I know I asked Albert, I know I asked you yesterday, but how do you say the company name?
Well, it's I think it was originated from Kadena, the Spanish word, and I think that's also how you pronounce it. I know internally we always, even internally, the name Kadena isn't pronounced in an even way, but yeah, I think it is Kadena.
Fair enough. Okay, cool. We do the same thing at Ivan, where it's AIVEN, and people say AVN. Like, I hear so many different versions that even internally we're just like, it's cool. It's cool. We're a finished company, whatever. It works. So, next big question. Why Kadena over Ethereum?
This may be a good one for John.
Yeah, sure. So Kadena is a layer 1 blockchain as well, like Ethereum, and it also has smart contracts. But we are a proof of work still, and we therefore value decentralization. We have very, very low gas fees. Like, you wouldn't even be able to pay enough gas to make up a single cent right now. And we have scalability. If a chain becomes too congested by a particular app, it can move onto one of the many chains that make up the Kadena environment. And our contract language, finally, is it's designed for simplicity and security, and to help you as a contract author write code that is fully expressive of your intent, rather than worrying about how that code is going to be executed and whether that might introduce bugs. So I would call it like Ethereum ++. It's just all of the things you might like about Ethereum, but it smooths them all out.
Yeah, same as C and C++, Ethereum ++.
I was going to say, I see it. I like it.
Yeah. Well, fun fact as well. I mean, I think it was 2 weeks ago. I was at the Ethereum conference, and there they had a badge. But before you could actually print the badge, you had to claim your name. So, and that's a name you had to buy on the Ethereum network. So buying the name cost $10. And when I wanted to buy the name, I had to pay $40 of gas fees.
Wow.
So eventually the $10 was $50, and I thought, no, I'm not going to pay this. So I waited till the evening, and then the gas fees came down a little bit, $10, but still I had to pay the same amount as the value of the name itself. And on Kadena, something like that will never happen because we actually can scale.
Interesting. All right. Anybody else have anything to add? Sweet. Because the next one, how could Web 2 be enhanced by Web 3?
Right. Yeah, I can pick that one if you want. So basically, we did it already with the workshop that we did, but I think mainly we should enhance the whole experience in terms of security. So you don't want to store passwords of your users. You don't want to store all this information that you don't need to identify a user, because that could end up, with security concerns. So things like passwordless login, that's something that you can do with Web3. You can actually do it even without Web3, because you can just do public private key authentication, right? And as long as the client or the end user is keeping his private key safe, it will never be, how do you say that in English? Not confirmed, but compromised. Yes, sorry, thank you. So that's really nice. And then the other thing of Web3 is you can make all the hard parts like payments. If you for example use Stripe or something, you have to pay a lot of money, basically per transaction, like 25 cents or something, and then a percentage of the transaction what you want to sell to the middleman, which is expensive, right? So especially if you want to buy a pair of glasses of like I don't know, 150 euros or something, then that's okay-ish if you have to pay 3% and 25 euros. But if you want to start a Kickstarter for a car or something of more value, 3% becomes a lot of money. So at that point, Web3 can really bring the advancement of and especially with Kadena, with low gas fees and yeah, basically an easy way to get that to the people everywhere.
What I like as well is because it's more than security, of course, Web3, also this decentralization part. As a good example, this is an example I have used many times already with John as well. It's when buying an airline ticket. When I buy an airline ticket, for instance, at one airline company, and I want to upgrade my seat, but I find out the airline that actually executes the flight is a different airline company. Then I actually have to download the other app, make a whole new login, share all my information before I can actually upgrade my seat, which is kind of strange because if we have like one decentralized platform where I buy my ticket and via smart contract, I can just upgrade my ticket or whatsoever. It doesn't matter which app I'm currently using. It can be this airline company, can be that airline company. I can even just write code to upgrade my seat because it's all happening in a decentralized way. And if the seat is still open, I can just select it. So it's more than just security. It's also the decentralization part and many more use cases. And probably we will get into this during this call for sure. But I also want to emphasize that part as well.
Nice one.
Were you talking about my flight back from New York last week? Because that literally happened. American went from JetBlue, and I had no idea till I checked in. I couldn't check in. I had to go create all JetBlue stuff. So that's
exactly. That's exactly that. So, and it's real easy to create like an open decentralized system for that.
Mm-hmm.
But the question is, why aren't we doing that at the moment?
Randy, I have one question about this. I mean, in theory, it sounds perfect, right? But what happens with we have so many blockchains out there.
Yeah.
So therefore, we would need that all the companies align in one blockchain at least, or that they can communicate internally one with the other, right? For that use case that you just said. So
Exactly.
what would you suggest in this case, or what's your opinion on this?
It's a good question. So if we want to create all these systems, like best use case scenario is that all of this is happening on one chain. Or we can even use multiple chains like Kadena, because actually Kadena uses multiple chains. As long as we can get to an agreement that one source of truth is the truth. So you can even create a layer 2 or even book the ticket on Ethereum, as long as the actual settlement will happen on one particular chain.
Mm-hmm. But that would mean that all the blockchain founders or communities should agree on that. So that there needs to be a consentment between them, right?
Not necessarily, because you can currently also have like bridges and protocols where you can actually talk from one blockchain, talk to a different blockchain.
Mhm.
The only thing is that handshake, that connection that needs to be built.
Great, thank you.
You have so many questions going through my head now, and I'm like, I will save them for later, and go with the ones we have right now. Of should we move 100% to Web3?
John, you look like you want to answer this one, man.
I'm
Well,
like, do we have spicy takes on this one? Is this like a hot take?
No, it's something that I've always been wondering about myself as well, because I think that blockchain solves a really, really key social problem, which is how can we, as a group of human beings, the public, how can we have a database that serves our interests, right? So that it's public data, but you cannot modify it unless you own that data, and you cannot corrupt the history of that data. There are a lot of things you can do that have really a lot of social benefit with such a structure. Just registering my car, for example, or if I sell my car, having the responsibility of the car transfer from me to the new owner at the same time that I report to the DMV that I sold the car. Like, if I had a public database and it wasn't just some database private to the DMV, then it'd be accessible to other companies, like my the company who does the toll booth swiper, and they would know that car was not owned by me, and the police would know not to ticket me if they saw a car with that license plate. Like, anyway, so all of this is incredibly valuable, but that value doesn't mean that everything should be there, right? It's kind of like this joke that George Carlin used to say is, whenever a plane crashes, they get the black box out and they find out what happened to the plane. So why don't they just make the whole plane out of the black box material? Like, I feel like this is that same question. If blockchain's so wonderful and has all these properties, why don't we just build everything on blockchain? But no, it's tuned to a particular type of use case, and it has costs in order to provide that use case. So my ideal world is a hybrid one, where it's not only multi-chain, it's also multi-protocol. It's Web 2 parts combined with Web 3 parts, so that each part is optimized for the value it's providing, but you don't lose anything at the same time, because Web 3 does have latency costs. It has compute costs. It does incur overhead, and we just need to be responsible about that.
It sounds to me, John, one of the things I'm getting from it is, like, if you need multiple agencies, multiple entities to have access to some of the same information, that's a really good use case for Web3, right?
Yeah.
It's decentralized, but in a way it's also centralized. Everybody can go to one spot to get it.
Right.
I like that.
Yeah,
And there's-
imagine that you would want to buy a piece of land from your neighbor, and you wouldn't need to go to a land register from the government to have a third party confirm that you actually bought this piece of land and did the transfer and paid the money and whatnot. You can just say, okay, I want to register that this piece of land is now owned by me, and in return I pay whoever is selling that piece of land with a certain amount of money. That would be so cool, so easy, and so much less hassle to make that happen.
Yeah.
That gave me just an idea for a project. Thank you. And
And even to go further, it's like, I just read an article the other day about a guy who owned a piece of land in New Hampshire, who came home. He hadn't visited that parcel in many years, and when he came, there was a house being built on it, and he had no idea. So imagine if building permits had to be signed by my private key as the holder of title on the chain. It would just eliminate that class of problems.
yeah. And what about
That is
voting?
bananas.
Voting in elections, for example. So everybody's the vote itself would be not public, right? But nobody could vote or manipulate it.
Mm-hmm.
That would be awesome at the end, and that's what we aim for, right? But no government is going for it yet.
Yes.
They will at some point.
And hopefully on Kadena.
Yeah, it's the thing about power, right? So you have to release some power to, put it in the hands of like a decentralized system, which is, a scary step to make. But at some point, some things will happen there. And also, especially with voting, you can create like 1,000 private keys so you can vote whatever you want. So there needs to be some governing mechanism that identifies that you as a person identify only with one, one vote basically, or one key, or that you know that all those keys are connected to you as a person. So there needs to, especially with voting, there needs to be a mechanism that will do that. But tying something physical to something on the blockchain, like maybe certificates for if you buy a Nike shoe or something and you want to sell it, you sell also this token that identifies this Nike shoe with that physical entity, and then only the reseller can sell it.
Albert, I have a question about that, because since I started with Web3, like, I don't know, 6-7 years ago, and I came over NFTs, I thought already of that project. So connecting the digital world with the physical world, right? So how can I certificate that those shoes are mine and that those shoes are real Nikes, right?
Right.
You can do that, right? But the problem here is, what happens if you have a tag in there that you scan that certificates it, but somebody removes that tag and put it in some other shoes?
Yeah, that can happen, but there's still only one, because even though you can do that, there will be only one that you can transfer, because it can be only transferred once. So you can only replicate this fake shoe once, and then it's done. Now you can, you go to China, you buy 1 million of those shoes and you sell them as real shoes. No one is knowing whether you have actually, because it has to be Nike who initiates the first seller, and then you can track the selling, right?
So you could duplicate them. So sorry, Gene. You could actually duplicate the shoes, keep the originals, and sell the others as originals, but you could not do that for more than once, right? So
yes, exactly.
Okay, okay, great.
And I think this does go into the next question too, because we're starting to talk about resources and the way we're able to use all of them. The next question is, more calculations means certainly more resources involved in a project. Is there any way to calculate the extra resources of cost when moving from Web 2 to Web 3?
It depends on, I guess, how many saves you do on the blockchain. A good example is on Kadena blockchain. I know the Kadena Miner Club, they sell a lot of NFTs. And I don't know the exact amount. I thought they sold 10,000 NFTs last month, and they paid only $10 of gas fees, which is extremely cheap. I don't know what the cost, what that would have been on like the AWS or whatsoever.
Well, even if they would use like Stripe for the payment, it would cost $2,500 already.
Yeah, exactly. Because
if you pay 25 cents a transaction. Indeed.
So it depends on like the calculations. It's not where you make the calculation, but because on Web 2 or on Web 3, you have to do those calculations. It doesn't matter where you do them. As long as you don't do them on a chain, it's very expensive.
Yes, if you do them on Ethereum.
There's also an offset cost to be considered as well, because if you look at the way companies have provided services on the internet, like in the old days, you would have a server rack in the building of the company. And then that moved to being in a data center. And then that moved to being on the cloud in AWS. And every time there was an offset cost. So if you moved from what you were doing in a data center to AWS, you were usually also dropping the in-house IT team that was keeping all of those racks running. And so AWS was a little bit more expensive than the stock hardware was to buy, but the individuals hired to maintain it were more expensive than just having the hardware itself. So when you're going to Web3, for example, on AWS, if you want high availability, you have to pay for that. But that is something you get for free from a blockchain. High availability is just built into the scheme of how it runs. So if you're paying a lot for high availability, you might have some costs that increase going to Web3, but you're going to lose some other costs depending on the nature of what it is that you're running on Web3. And that again comes back to the question of, is it better to run everything on Web3 or not? And no, there are certain high value things that are better to be run on Web3, where the cost of reproducing that value in a Web2 setting, I think would be just as expensive or have similar costs. They just might be spread about differently.
That brings, it does, it's weird how all of them are circling back because to the next questions, because I think at the same time, because we talked about the resources and to like Bodhi's question about like, how do you talk about, are these authentic and the duplication of things? And I think it's a bit confusing because we're talking about resources and duplication of things, but then we keep also talking about this term gas. And I think I'm like, oh, when I go get in the car to go somewhere, you know, there's gas, or we were talking about flights, and then we're also talking about duplicating
expensive
things. Yeah. So what is gas, and can we kind of like see how these all connect together?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to take this one. So a blockchain is, as I said before, a public resource, and it's also a shared resource. So if all 6 of us want to use it at the same time, there needs to be some way of measuring the payment for that resource. Like, how do I meter my use of it? So what kind of computation I'm going to run, how much data I'm going to send. If you can think of every moment in time that's needed to run your computation as costing something, that cost measure is in gas. We just call it gas. You could call it fuel. You could call it like metering electricity on the side of my house. It just basically makes sure that your use of that public resource is charged for appropriately. But additionally, it creates an economic incentive, which is, what if all 6 of us want to do a computation and we want to compete? We want our computation to go in first. What you can do then in a blockchain scenario is you can say that you're willing to pay more for gas. So the amount of gas that your computation uses stays constant, but the amount that you're willing to pay per unit gas goes up. And I can just keep upping it until Randy says, okay, fine, I'm out. I'm gonna wait to be second in the queue because I'm willing to spend, you know, I've seen people on Ethereum spend $15,000 for gas because the value of making that transaction happen right away was more than 15,000. They were bidding on an NFT for $1 million. They wanted to own that NFT so they could turn around and flip it. So gas becomes this way to distribute access to the resource in a way where people pay for priority, but everybody pays. And so in the off hours, you don't pay as much, but you're always being metered to see how much of that resource you're using.
Can I ask you a question? Would that mean that one particular person or multiple ones, if they would just keep competing and raising the price, they could just intentionally rise up the price because they never let it go down?
Well, the gas fluctuates instantaneously, right? So you raise gas in order to win a competition, but that competition doesn't change the price of gas. It's not like a stock market. Once that once that transaction has gone through, then whatever computation is next in the queue and whatever amount that it said it was going to pay for gas, if nobody else is there in the queue next, that one will go in. And so this is, this isn't something.
My question was more about a similar DDoS attack, where you just try moving the gas up so that nobody can pay it, in order to make somebody pay more for it. Would that be possible?
If you had endless resources and you just wanted to, well, one, you have to have a computation in the queue, right? And there are fairness schemes to prevent you from just absolutely dominating the queue at all times. But if you simply just flooded the network with money, what you're doing is you're rewarding all of the people who maintain the network because they receive those gas fees. So in a way, you're just basically in putting a whole bunch of cash into this network, and that's going to end up having a beneficial effect for the network in the long run. But I mean, there's really not much economic incentive to block out everybody else from the chain.
is it kind of like poker? Like every round is like a new way of doing things? Because like all I'm thinking as you guys are saying this is I'm like, so if you keep on your poker face, but you raise, your bet, then you get first dibs. But then at the end of it, when you get, that round is done and you purchased it, the next round is not going to start on that higher level. Right. It's going to start at an even playing ground again.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and most of the time it doesn't even care if you get like in the first block or the second block. Right. Only indeed if you have these high value purchases or anything like that. Right.
And then even so the thing is that there can fit, let's say, 10,000 transactions, or I don't know, 1,000 transactions in one block. That means that you have to push 1,000 transactions for a certain price that is high enough to fill the block to push others to the next block. Right? Mm-hmm. So you have to have something to calculate. And most of the time, well, a calculation is not just, well, you can make bogus calculations, of course, but that will not benefit you. Uh-huh. Because it doesn't turn into something real. Right. So it's basically a backlog for the next block to be calculated and confirmed and then distributed across the network to be, get consensus over this.
My question was not meant for benefiting myself, but for harming the network, for example. Yes. If somebody would want to do that, if he could.
Yeah.
Yes, he could in theory.
It's highly unlikely.
In theory, but you need limitless resources for it. Of course.
Yeah, I would love to see this happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
Next question then does this mean that Kadena gas fees do not take necessary energy costs into account?
That's a very good question. Mining power on the network does not translate to any increase in gas cost. So these are two separate factors. Gas is for economic competition for the resource. Energy cost is what the miners need in order to produce blocks and get their block in first so that they get paid that gas amount, for example.
Yeah. And for a proof of work network, Kadena is actually a very green solution compared to Bitcoin, which is...
Yeah. And imagine if you would have 10 computers working to find this specific hash that Doug talked about for this one block. That would require 10 computers are now competing for this one block in these 30 seconds. So basically 1/10 of this energy is lost into not finding the hash.
9/10.
Now
9/10.
Sorry, 9/10. 1/10 is only used. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
And then, so now imagine that you have 10 chains, which we have. We have actually 20 chains, but let's imagine 10 chains. And now those 10 computers are now sharing their power over each of those chains because every chain needs to produce a block. So that means that every computer is actually working towards a common goal and get the reward that it needs. So, and then the balance in green and making sure that the energy is not destroying the earth is that whenever it becomes invaluable to start up your miner and receive the reward for finding that block, then the miners will drop out because it will not be economically viable, which means there will be less power available, which in turn means there will be more people. Well, the difficulty of creating the next block will go down, which means it will take less energy. So there is always this balance is always on how much does energy cost and how much does it reward for finding a block. And this is a very nice balance because there will always be good for, if governments impose like taxes on using energy, then this will get an effect onto blockchains as well.
Right.
Are y'all cheating? Because I feel like you keep leading into the next question. because so do gas fees pay the miners, and is Kadena still attractive to miners? Because you started talking about the effect with miners.
Yeah, so gas fees indeed are going to the miners. And I think at the moment, Kadena is one of the most attractive chains, even for miners. Fun fact, I just got a miner from John. Arrived to me today. So yeah, it's still a very attractive way to...
right. And they receive both gas fees and newly minted coins. So both are income sources. And Kadena is set up to continue minting coins until 2125. So we will likely not be around before the end of the coin supply has been mined from the network.
Yeah, and this is really good because at that point, the amount of transactions will be enough to sustain the network on gas fees only.
That means that I have like 6 computers lying around. I could just start mining and stop my job.
Well,
would it be enough or not yet?
It's going to take more power than what CPUs can offer, more power than what GPUs can offer. Like what Randy just received in the mail is a unit, a box that is dedicated only to solving hashing problems. And so it can solve 166 trillion hash problems per second in about as much power as it takes for me to run the space heater in my room. So another thing that comes up, people talk about proof of work and the costs of energy. And human beings, we spend energy all the time to do anything that we consider useful to us. So if a miner, actually, it produces a lot of heat too. You could use a miner as a space heater if it weren't for the noise of it. But it's like the question is the energy output gainful? Is it providing a social value? We spend energy in profligate ways left and right if you're looking solely at energy cost. Because heaters take up like, 1.5 kilowatt. A typical space heater, whereas Randy's miner takes 3 kilowatt.
Are there pictures or videos of this miner?
Yeah, I have a picture of the miner.
I mean, like that's all that I'm like, I want to see some visualizations of this.
Is there a hard hat? Yeah.
Yeah, like what are we talking about? What are we talking about? Which, by the way, as being like learning and getting into tech, like also learning about like Edge and Cloudflare and stuff, and going that there's workers there. I'm like, no wonder we confuse so many people. We have workers, we have miners, we have like so many different things. But next question for y'all of what would be some good use cases for blockchain technology and what aren't?
So yeah, I got one, which is don't put just images for the sake of a database on the blockchain. I mean, if you actually connect like value to that image, then it's something, then it has some worth, right? But the thing is that basically nothing of tangible value that is assigned to you as a person should be on the blockchain. That's, I think, a good measure of what you should put on the blockchain and what you shouldn't. Yeah, others want to pitch in, I guess.
Yeah. So I think good use cases are maybe supply chain. So supply chain solutions are that's actually the blockchain is extremely well suited for. For instance, if I buy a piece of chocolate, I actually want to know the supply chain, where actually the beans actually came from. So I can actually track that the farmers actually got the right amount of price for their chocolate bean. Now that would actually be one of the use cases. But certificates, I would love to see a Vue.js certificate on chain, a Vue School certificate maybe, right? So
you
have
to be
very-
it's just not on the blockchain. Yeah.
yeah, why isn't it on the blockchain?
That's right. Why isn't it?
That's an awesome suggestion. We could work together. You do that contract, and we mint that for the people. That's awesome.
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, it's really easy, and it's very. You can check the authenticity of the contract.
And then we can explain all of that on Teach Gen Tech and be on my show. So like, we'll just like, after that's done, everybody will come on the show. I love it.
And going back to like the black box analogy, like think about if you had a PO box, a safety deposit box in the bank, right? You don't want to put all your belongings in there because it's such a precious resource. There's very little space available. But you could put a picture of your belongings there, and then that could serve as proof to your insurance agency when your house gets burnt that that was what I owned at this particular moment in time. So that makes it in a tiny, tiny amount of space, able to reference a large amount of things.
Yeah, good one.
Yeah, zero knowledge is also one of the things I'm very, very excited about. And John is currently working with that. Maybe you can tell it best. Maybe you can explain a little bit about ZK as well, because that's what really excites me a lot.
Well, I ideally ZK will be something that end users will not directly interface with very much. It's more of an enabling technology. It allows us to have things like multi-chain cooperation that does not sacrifice any of the security and any of the utility that blockchain is known for. Because if you look in the press and you see all of these reports of billions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars being stolen from projects, it's because chains are trying to bridge assets between each other in a way that does not preserve the security of either one of the source or the destination chains. And ZK, you can think of it as like this particular kind of connecting link that, like with all Web3 technologies, comes with huge cost. But if that cost is offsetting the $20 billion you might have lost due to lack of security, then that cost is well worth paying for. So just mathematically, it gives us a way to say something happened and a proof that that's exactly what did happen. And then the other chain can believe me when I tell them what work I did, because they have this proof of receipt, this certificate of authenticity of the work that I did.
Yeah.
So this sounds really valuable. I mean, this is the way you bridge all the networks, right?
Yes,
And
yeah.
And there are several projects doing that today, and we want to integrate with them. Yeah.
And you can also prove it for maybe identity purposes, or if I want to buy something, for instance, if I go to the grocery store and I want to buy alcohol, and I need to prove that I'm older than 18, but I don't want to share my passport or whatsoever because there's so much information on it. They only need to know, well, you're able to buy a beer, right? So if you generate a proof, that's kind of like a black box, and you with a small opening on top, and you are the only one who can open that box with a private key. You give that box to the person behind the counter. She writes something on the paper, puts it in the black box, and I grab the black box and tell the person that stands next to me, "Can you open the black box?" He or she cannot open it because he doesn't have the private key. If I can open the private box and tell that person what she wrote on that piece of paper, well, then I prove I'm the owner of the box, and that proves I'm able to buy a beer. And that's also the power of ZK, and that's very, very exciting.
That's a super valuable illustration, Randy. This is a lot of new stuff to me, and that clicks. That's
Interesting.
Finally, Daniel, finally
for me, yeah.
All right, last question. What are you doing to make blockchain technology accessible?
Yeah, this has Randy and Albert all of it.
Yeah, we're actually doing a lot of things. As we believe, blockchain will not get mass adoption if the user experience lacks. So the thing is, we need to create an intuitive, like smooth way of actually adopting this blockchain technology. If people still know they're using blockchain technology, we will never get mass adoption. So I think most of us grinding through the hassle of creating a wallet with a private key, and all of that. I cannot explain that to my kid, that he needs to create a private key and remember that 12 or 24 words for his passphrase. These are so many hurdles nowadays you get when you're working with blockchain technology. And I think what we're currently doing is creating like smart wallets, like those are programmable wallets, integrating WebAuthn, so you can actually sign with your fingerprint, Face ID, YubiKey, or whatsoever. Leveraging zero knowledge, layer 2 for like faster transactions. But I think one of the main important things is also our gas stations. So actually, companies, I think we also did it in the app. So if you create a gas station, you can actually abstract away the whole blockchain and only serve the viewers with a view. And everything that we need to store on the blockchain, we just store on the blockchain, and the gas station will pay for the gas fees. So we never charge the user for actually signing for any gas. So actually, they can interact with blockchain for free. They only need to have their private key. So I think all of that stuff is very powerful. Do you have some more examples, Albert?
Yeah, so more of the things that we do is like for developers, we are trying, because in the end it's the developers first, right? Because if there's no apps on the blockchain, then no one will use it. So what we do is we're working on a GraphQL endpoint where you can get your information, subscribe to events that happen on the chain. We already released a Chain Web Stream, is what we call it. It's just a service and events tool that can, listen to whatever is happening on the chain, and then you can act upon it in your, app, game, or whatever you're using or whatever you're building. And and especially the Kadena client is one of the ones that will make interacting with the chain really easy. And so that's the space that we're working in. We're mostly working with developer tooling, and in the end, it's up to the app builders and people who want to interact. And if you make a Kickstarter, or I saw a very nice idea about making a tool to transfer money between two people when someone mows your lawn or something. If you make a simple app that has some community feeling into it, then people will start using it, and then it becomes not the blockchain anymore. It becomes just, another tool in your pocket that you can use. And that's basically what we're working towards.
At the end, it sounds like it's more up to developers than to the mass adoption of people, right? Because nobody cares if your service currently is in AWS or on your server in your house. It's just about the app, right? Not the technology it's using behind it. So it sounds exactly like that. So it's more up to the devs to start building and benefit, of course, of the blockchain technology.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying, right? Yeah. And that's, for example, smart wallets is a very nice example, because smart wallets will allow the average user to use blockchain. And how we can do that? Maybe the banks need to provide smart wallets, right? And they are then custodians of the private keys, so that you don't lose your money when you are.
Please
no, of course. If you don't want to do that, fine. By all means, you don't need to. But then you have to, remain the owner of the 12 words and make sure that you are in charge. And that's the choice, right? You can make this choice.
I mean, I'm just thinking about that. Why it needs to be 12 words? Why can it not be just your fingerprint? So imagine Apple or Google implementing it in their devices by default.
Yes. So that's what we're working with WebAuthn, for example. Yeah.
Exactly. So you don't care anymore about those 12 words because it's encrypted in your device once you put your fingerprint.
Yes, but what happens if your device breaks? Now you have no money. You lost everything. It will be in limbo. So you need to think about that use case as well.
I feel like we have a very big debate going on right now that I'm like, we could just spend an entire hour just on this, because I'm also thinking about like 1Pass, and when I had to talk to my IT and go, so I didn't have my backup codes. And can you just delete my account so I can have a brand new account, please? Thank you.
Okay.
So
We're actually
the
working
words.
on all of that. So
Yeah. Any closing thoughts that anybody wants to add before we wrap up?
So I would say I want to reach out to all these developers out here to actually get all the stuff you learned during this course and all those great ideas that are out there. Probably you have some great ideas as well. Put them to action and start building some stuff on blockchain technology. Leverage the Web3 technologies.
And do it with
Ditto.
Vue also. Yeah.
And Vue, yes. And get that Vue certificate.
Yes.
John, you want to say something? No closing
Albert,
remarks. Okay.
Was there anything you wanted to share too?
Yeah, just share my screen because I found well, it's one of the miners. There's a bunch of miners, but I just wanted to show you because it will speak to your imagination, right? So this is just a miner that will hash 166 terahashes a second, and this is the income, and this is your cost. So your profit is something like this. And this is, of course, taking into consideration a bunch of things and making a bunch of assumptions. But yeah, that's the nice thing. It can be done. And you can, even if let's say you have solar panels and you're not using the power and you're, selling your energy to an energy company, well, you probably get less than when using this energy that you're making, right? So why not, make some smart tooling and attach Home Assistant to it and run your miner when the sun is shining.
I need you to share this link with me.
I'm thinking about that.
And it's not light. I'll tell you that.
All
right.
All right, y'all.
I think I also want to thank you all for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you very
for
much.
this panel. It was very fun. It was a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Yes,
Great having everybody.
it's really great.
Agreed. Awesome. Thank you all for joining us today, and looking forward to seeing more of what all of you will be up to. So thank you.